Chapter 1. The Arrival and the Test. Kene felt Lagos before he understood it. The moment the bolt merged into the city, the environment surged toward him as a single, coordinated pulse closing in from every angle at once. What should have been separate lanes shifted unpredictably, expanding and collapsing in movements that reminded him of something alive. The sound hit him next as a single, dense wave, horns flaring inside it, engines rising and dropping beneath it. The low churn of generators, and even the faint tremor of construction folded into the same pulse. He wasn't hearing individual noises anymore. The whole mix pressed into his chest as one continuous momentum, something he could feel even through the sealed windows. Heat shimmered across the scene, bending light and motion into a blur, and the constant movement on the streets. Stalls opening, traffic inching forward, pedestrians flowing through gaps that made no spatial sense, washed over him as one uninterrupted sweep of activity he couldn't separate into pieces. Colors, motion, sound, they flashed and shifted too quickly to isolate. Lagos wasn't giving him details. It was giving him urgency. The atmosphere carried its own insistence, as if everything around him had been in motion long before he entered it. He felt his breath tighten, not from fear but from the sheer force of a system that did not care whether he was ready. Lagos wasn't presenting itself to be understood. It was setting terms. It was already in motion, already in conflict, already demanding alignment. And as the bolt moved deeper into the streets, the truth landed with a weight he couldn't ignore. He wasn't simply arriving in a new place. He was being tested by it. The intensity of the city pressed deeper the longer he sat in it, and as the pressure built, a memory rose without invitation. A few weeks earlier, during his first days at McKinsey, he had been handed his initial assignment, with only a brief onboarding behind him. Two senior consultants had watched him work through tangled numbers and shifting expectations, observing how he approached the problem and how he organized the moving parts. In the structured calm of an office, he had taken that early scrutiny in stride, treating it as part of the normal rhythm of beginning at a firm that expected precision from the start. The phrases they had used back then to describe his approach, such as strong analytical instinct, comfort with ambiguity, and clarity under pressure, drifted through his mind but slipped away as the city moved faster than he could track. Lagos offered no buffer. The laptop at his side, normally a source of orientation, now felt inadequate in a place where theory carried no leverage. What the environment demanded was not the polished composure he had been praised for. It required a steadier presence, the capacity to read movement as it happened, and the discipline to stay aligned with the pace around him. Every pulse of sound and shift of traffic made it clear that Lagos was not a backdrop, but a force already in progress, measuring him by how quickly he adapted rather than how well he prepared. He knew he was brilliant. He had been told as much for years, but brilliance here felt abstract, a theory waiting to be proven against a reality that did not slow down for anyone. The founder he was scheduled to meet existed to him only as an outline in the McKinsey brief. It was a business that had taken root, gathered real traction, and was now pressing against the edges of its current shape. It had grown enough so that the consulting firm believed strategic clarity could shift its trajectory. The description was intentionally sparse, a handful of signals that hinted at opportunity without offering him anything to grip, and even that limited framing carried a sharper weight inside this environment. In training, the firm's methodologies felt stable, almost architectural. Here, they felt tentative beside a city that operated through momentum rather than models. And as he sat in that tension, he felt something tighten in his chest. It was a quiet recognition that whatever came next would reveal something essential. It would show whether the confidence McKinsey had placed in him could withstand the demands of a business forged in motion rather than theory. Reconnaissance at the gates. When the bolt finally slowed to a stop across the street from the building, the momentum of the city still clung to him. It hummed in his chest as if his body had not yet caught up to the stop. He cracked the door open and the heat met him instantly, heavy and unfiltered. It carried the same restless energy he had been absorbing from behind the glass. Stepping out felt like entering a different layer of the same system. No quieter, no gentler, just closer. The street moved with its own rhythm, fast enough that he had to tune his senses immediately. A passing Okada skimmed by him with a sharp gust of displaced air, close enough that he instinctively hitched his laptop bag higher on his shoulder. The rider's brief glance was not accusatory or apologetic. It was simply a recognition of pace, as if to say this was a place where attention, not courtesy, kept you intact. Kene crossed toward the building with careful steps, letting his breath level out as he moved. The intensity of Lagos still clung to him. The noise, the motion, and the relentless pressure refused to loosen their grip. The walk across the street felt like the first moment his nervous system had been allowed to catch up. At the base of the narrow metal staircase, he paused. The faint jitter in his hands had nothing to do with fear, and everything to do with recalibration. It was the mental adjustment required when someone left behind the safety of theory. It was the shift that took hold when a person stepped into an environment shaped by forces he could not control. McKinsey had called this phase an early-stage field immersion. It was described as a chance to feel a client's world before daring to diagnose it. He knew the firm's language well enough to see through the phrasing. They had wanted to know how a new consultant behaved when the variables were not contained. They had wanted to see whether he could track signals while the ground moved under him. They had wanted proof that he could hold clarity in an environment that refused to cooperate with tidy thinking. As he placed his foot on the first step, that awareness settled into him. This was not onboarding. This was reconnaissance, and he was already being evaluated. He climbed slowly, partly to steady himself and partly to let the thrum of the generator below fade into background noise. The staircase vibrated beneath his feet with each step. This was a quiet reminder of the physical infrastructure behind the work he was there to analyze. He imagined the partner who had assigned him this case, someone who was never stern or demanding but clear and exact about what needed to be done. She would not need to say she was watching. The firm's culture supplied the subtext. He knew the firm judged him by how well he applied his expertise when the real world pushed back against it. He pictured her in a polished conference room half a world away, scanning his notes later, looking for evidence that he could translate raw movement into structured insight. He thought about the founder inside this building, and about the confidence the man had placed in McKinsey to send someone capable. Those two expectations pressed against each other in his mind, and his pulse flickered at the thought of disappointing either one. And yet, beneath that tension, there was a quiet momentum pulling him forward, something that felt less like pressure and more like purpose. As he reached the landing, he scanned the exterior for confirmation, knowing that addresses in industrial corridors rarely aligned cleanly with maps, and his eyes settled on the simple sign that read SwiftClean before he continued on. The Industrial Moat. As he pushed the door open, he was confronted immediately by the production floor, not a front office or reception area as he might have expected. The space met him with a wall of motion and disciplined urgency, the kind of high-frequency activity that outsiders too quickly dismissed as chaos. But Kene saw immediately that nothing here was haphazard. The air carried the faint hum of an AC unit working steadily overhead. It pushed cool air across a room that, despite the controlled temperature, still held the heat of constant linen processing. Rows of neatly wrapped garments hung behind the counter, fresh from pressing, each tagged with a pickup code. A driver brushed past him wearing the company's dispatch vest, scanning a route list on his phone before heading back toward a line of electric bikes outside. Through the open service door, he caught a glimpse of industrial washers turning in steady rotation, steam drifting up from a pressing station in the corner. SwiftClean, he had only seen the name on the awning as he walked in, was clearly more than a storefront. It was a rapid-cycle laundry and garment care operation that lived or died by speed, precision, and the ability to hit same-day delivery windows without fail. Every movement in the space reinforced the point. This was a business built on timing, and it was running at full tilt. A staff member swept past Kene. She pressed a stack of perfectly folded uniforms against her chest while tapping quickly across her tablet, absorbed in some task he couldn't yet identify. Her movements had no drift, no hesitation. She moved like someone raised inside a culture where value was not a slogan but a mandate: transform the customer's day or fall behind. Almost at the same time, a quick burst of motion in the far corner caught his attention. It was a brief exchange at what appeared to be a small pickup station tucked away against the wall. A woman accepted a bundled order from a staffer and left with the same urgent cadence that governed the rest of the floor. Her exit folded seamlessly into the room's larger rhythm. Another staff member stepped forward almost immediately to set out the next wrapped bundle without breaking stride. Nothing paused. Every movement fed into something larger, as if the entire floor operated on a single, unspoken tempo that everyone here instinctively knew how to follow. The digital scheduling board behind the station pulsed with activity: driver assignments, route compression algorithms, garment priority flags for corporate clients demanding next-hour service. Every pixel represented a decision in motion, and mounted beside it, he could clearly see a capability dashboard that tracked the only metrics that mattered: turnaround time, garment loss probability, stain remediation success rate, customer repeat frequency. These weren't vanity reports for investors. They were survival metrics, blunt reminders of the strength SwiftClean depended on to stay ahead of rivals circling the same districts. As Kene continued to gaze around the room, something stirred inside him. Recognition, sharp and immediate. The movements were not just efficient, they were defensive. Like a crew guarding territory everyone else in the city wanted to steal. He could feel it in the speed of exchanges, in the way no worker let a garment rest a second longer than necessary. The staff moved with the clipped precision of people who understood that competitors were always nearby, offering discounts, promising earlier deliveries, whispering to customers that they could do the job better, faster, or cheaper. Out on the street, he had already seen rival riders waiting at intersections, glancing at SwiftClean's bike line with an edge that was not curiosity but calculation. Inside, that pressure translated into motion. Urgency was not decoration here, it was survival. Every cycle, every handoff, every route reset felt like a small refusal to let someone else take even a sliver of their business. He felt that refusal in the room's pulse, the way SwiftClean turned speed into something territorial. Kene's training surfaced again, not as rules, but as lenses snapping into place. Direction. The 5 to 10-year foresight, the long arc built from sensing shifts in customer wants, technology, lifestyle, work patterns, regulations, and geopolitics. Here, the long arc was not written on a wall, but he felt its pressure nonetheless. Nobody bought machines of this size just to keep up. They bought them to outrun the pack. A company did not scale from one storefront to multiple hubs unless its founder was already imagining the routes rivals had not yet noticed. Even the hum of the presses carried an edge, the confidence of a founder who assumed competitors were trying to reach the same contracts, the same neighborhoods, the same corporate accounts, and built a system designed to stay a step ahead. Capabilities were everywhere, though Kene did not think in that word as he stepped onto the floor. He slowed near the intake table, eyes settling on a worker who split a mixed pile of garments without breaking rhythm, hands moving left, right, forward, already reaching for the next piece before the last one cleared. No pause. No correction. He noticed there was no need for a second pass. He shifted his weight slightly, tracking how the pile thinned, how nothing backed up behind it. A rack rolled past him, already sorted, already tagged, and he turned his head to follow it, noticing how it did not wait for space to open. Space seemed to be there before it arrived. He moved deeper in, past the pressing stations, where finished pieces came off in clean sequence. A supervisor crossed behind the line, glanced once, and kept walking. Kene's eyes lingered on that moment, longer than the glance itself, then moved back to the flow. Another rack cleared. Another took its place. He glanced up at the clock, then back at the floor, catching the timing without writing it down. Near dispatch, his attention shifted outward. Through the open service door, he caught the quick movement of a rider already mounted, a bundle secured tight against the back of the bike, ready to cut through traffic before the next minute turned. He held that image for a second, then his eyes moved further out, past the bikes, catching the larger vehicles staged along the curb, box trucks, doors shut, waiting with a different kind of patience. He looked back inside, then out again, connecting the two without forcing it. Smaller loads moved fast, immediate, threading through the city. Larger volumes waited for consolidation, for scheduled drops, for institutions that ran on a different clock. He turned back to the floor, watching another rack approach dispatch, and understood that both rhythms were being fed from the same line. The handoff happened in one motion. No words. The rider was gone before the space fully reset. Kene stayed where he was for a second, scanning across the floor again, this time not at any single action but at how tightly everything connected. He looked for where things might slow, where someone might hesitate, where a decision might need to be made twice, and found none of it. Another cycle completed in front of him, intake to exit, without friction announcing itself. He exhaled quietly, eyes narrowing just slightly, holding the pattern without naming it, already sensing there was more underneath that he had not yet uncovered. Kene slowed near the center of the floor, no longer following a single task, just watching how everything held together. He glanced toward a wall where notices and charts were pinned, scanning quickly, then looking away when he found nothing that explained what he was already sensing. His eyes moved back to the operators. A minor hesitation surfaced at one station. A garment set down half a second longer than the others, and before it could stretch, the next movement absorbed it. The line corrected itself without anyone calling it out. Kene caught that, his gaze tightening slightly, then shifted to another part of the floor, looking for the same kind of slip, the same kind of recovery. He walked a few steps, slower now, watching how decisions were made without discussion. A worker adjusted their sequence mid-motion, another cleared space before it became a problem, and somewhere behind him a rack was redirected without noise or instruction. Kene turned his head just enough to track it, then faced forward again. Nothing announced itself, yet everything seemed to move with the same quiet insistence, as if there was a shared understanding no one needed to repeat. He exhaled through his nose, almost unconsciously, then glanced once more at the wall, as if expecting to find a statement that explained it, and again found none. He stood still for a moment, letting another full cycle pass in front of him, intake to dispatch, eyes moving with it, catching the absence of drag, the absence of excess. No clutter in motion, no extra steps, no visible hesitation allowed to linger. He did not name it, though the feeling had already settled in. Whatever held this place together was not written down for him to read. It was carried in how they moved, how quickly they closed gaps, how little room they gave for disorder to take shape. He stayed there a second longer, watching, knowing he was looking at something foundational, even if he had not yet put language to it. The founder's instinct. Then Kene noticed the man before he understood why the room shifted around him. A sharply dressed executive stepped through the service corridor with a precision that immediately separated him from everyone else on the floor. His stride carried an urgency that did not feel frantic but intentional, the kind of movement shaped by years of operating inside environments that punished hesitation. Kene had never seen him before, but there was something unmistakable in the way the man's presence drew attention, not by force, but by the clarity of someone who expected the system to keep pace with him. When he paused beside a pressing station, his gaze cut toward a small buildup of finished garments piling unevenly beside the table. A staff member was struggling to keep up. Without breaking rhythm, the executive lifted a hand, short, direct, economical. Another worker shifted instantly, dissolving the backlog within seconds. No raised voice, no performance, just a fluent command of the operational language, as if he were adjusting levers only he could see. Kene felt the observation settle. Whoever this was, he operated with the ease of someone who understood every pressure point inside the business. As the man continued moving across the floor, Kene tracked the rhythm of his attention and the speed of his reactions. He noticed how the man checked the space between stations, watched the timing of each handoff, and spotted the small lapses that caused items to stack up or workers to stall. Every adjustment the man made was specific and timed, the kind of intervention that kept the entire line from drifting off pace. Kene had seen this pattern before in operators who carried the full weight of a site in their heads. They did not wait for problems to mature. They stepped in before anyone else understood what had gone wrong. The staff reacted to him with a mix of familiarity and alertness, shifting positions without needing verbal instruction. With each correction, Kene saw more clearly that this was not a supervisor doing rounds, but someone who knew the business at a depth only ownership or long stewardship created. When the man finally approached, he offered his hand and said, "I am Tunde." The pieces locked into place. The presence Kene had been reading across the floor belonged to the founder. It was the person whose instincts were shaping every movement inside the building. Kene spoke. "You have built something remarkable," he said quietly, "and I want to understand how you see the future before we build the path to reach it." Tunde's expression did not soften, but it sharpened. "Good," he said, "because the future is why you are here." He gestured for Kene to follow him off the floor and into a quieter corner office, where the noise fell away and the weight of the moment settled between them. Kene took a breath, deep and grounding and deliberate. Everything he had been taught pressed into him. Direction meant constructing a 5 to 10-year vantage point. Capabilities meant fortifying the moat through irreplaceable strengths. Value meant delivering one transformation so powerful it accelerated revenue on its own. And true north meant aligning every decision toward dominance, not survival. SwiftClean was already halfway there. Now it was his job to pull the long arc into view. He took his laptop from his bag and set it on the table but did not open it yet. He looked at Tunde instead. "Let us begin," he said. The air shifted. Two minds aligning on the same battlefield, one with instinct, one with structure, both committed to building a future that competitors would see only after it was already too late. Kene let the silence hold for a moment, the laptop still closed beneath his hands, because the weight of the moment rested with the founder, not with the screen. "Before we talk numbers," he said, "I need to understand why you invited us in at this moment. Not last year, not 3 years from now. Now." Scaling the industrial grid, Tunde's gaze held steady. "Because this version of SwiftClean is almost at its limit," he said. "We can still push, but one more year of growth like this, and the cracks will start to show." Our equity partners, who provided our last capital infusion, did not deploy the capital for us to remain a single-site operator. They invested with a different outcome in mind. This business is meant to move beyond a single location and become a coordinated platform. They expect multiple hubs across Lagos Island and the mainland, Victoria Island, Ikeja, Surulere, Yaba, then Abuja and Port Harcourt. After that, a wider footprint that aligns with the expansion corridors of multinational hotel groups, FM companies, and healthcare networks. Nairobi, Johannesburg, Kigali, Accra, cities where the same brands operating here expect identical standards. The target is exact: 120 locations in 10 years. Industrial plants, supported by standardized collection sites. Fixed SLAs, GPS-timed routes. A uniform operating model that performs the same whether the client is in Lekki or Santon. Kene nodded, absorbing the scale. "So the mandate is continental expansion," he said. "But only if the system can be replicated without carrying forward the weaknesses. The people must hold. The process must hold. The technology must hold. Everything has to carry 10 times the load with clients who do not tolerate inconsistency." Tunde exhaled. We are not building a bigger shop. We are building an industrial grid. And the capital partners behind us want evidence that the system can scale cleanly. They want to see where this industry will be 10 years from now, what role we play in Nigeria and across Africa, where we must be in that future, and what must be reinforced now so that, when we scale, we do not collapse under our own ambition, or NEPA, or diesel costs, or the loss of a headline corporate contract. Kene nodded slowly, taking in the weight of it. So the mandate is expansion, but only if the system is disciplined enough to be repeated. People, process, and technology that can carry a heavier load without slipping, especially with corporate clients who do not forgive failure. The idea of direction returned with more force now. In Kene's training, direction was the discipline of holding a 5 to 10 year view and breaking that view into steps the company could realistically take. It was not a forecast or a dream. It was a way of turning a distant future into stages that could be reached through the skills the team already had and the revenue the business could actually earn. Hearing Tunde speak about limits and expansion made that framework feel immediate instead of theoretical. He let that understanding settle, then said, "Then we do this properly. We do not start with a slide deck. We start with a week in the field, and each day we answer one question that defines the next 5 years of this business. Day 1, we examine how customer wants are changing and what new problems or needs may appear. Day 2, we look at what new technology or processes are emerging and how one or two could improve the work. Day 3, we study how daily life is changing for your customers and what small shifts in habits could create new ways your service matters. Day 4, we evaluate changes in how people work and how one of those shifts may affect how they use or need your product. Day 5, we identify what government rules or laws are new or coming and how one of them could create an opening or requirement that shapes demand. Day 6, we consider the geopolitics and how the fixed physical geography of the region defines the limits or opportunities for your industry. And when the 6 days are complete, we use everything we have gathered to craft the 5-year vision statement that anchors where the company must stand and what it must become. In summary, we will research and listen before we design. We will study how your clients' wants are shifting, which technologies and processes actually help, how daily life and work patterns are changing for your corporate stakeholders, what regulations are tightening, and how geopolitics are already anchoring your cost base in their budgets. From that, we build your blueprint 5 to 10 years out with a small set of major checkpoints or milestones. And we insist that every checkpoint can be reached through what your current funding and what you can learn. No dependency on fantasy capital. We will only pursue the vision that is supported by skills the team has developed or can develop in time. Tunde's mouth tilted in something close to a smile. So we go out, he said. You are not staying in this office, making PowerPoints. Kene nodded, tightening the strap of his laptop bag. We go out, he echoed. Give me a few hours to prepare, understand the flow of the area, then we start. The week was never meant to be a sequence of interviews around a table. It was designed to unfold in motion. Insights revealed themselves in rushed conversations, small frustrations, and the way people behaved when they were actually trying to get work done. By late afternoon, the two men were sitting in a SwiftClean truck as it crawled through the heavy traffic on Ozumba and Badiwe. The Lagos humidity pushed through the open windows, thick and insistent. This first day had a singular mandate: observe how customer wants were shifting in real time. The second task was to catch the earliest hints of wants that were forming, but not yet spoken aloud. That meant watching, listening, and staying close,